Welcome everyone to the Coalition for Marriage YouTube channel. Those of you who are joining us again know the spiel. We are the UK's largest pro-marriage organisation, representing tens of thousands of people who support this thing, one man, one woman marriage. Yes, we know other things take place in a liberal democracy. Of course they do, but we think marriage is special. Marriage is unique. It's the thing that only one man and one woman can do. And it's even unique from things like just living together. And the stats and the data is very clear about that sort of stuff. And it's a real privilege to have a newlywed couple with us today who have bucked the trend. They decided not to live together before they got married, but to save everything for marriage and to make it as special as they could. It's a real privilege to welcome Lois McClatchy Miller and Dr. Callum Miller. Hi, both. Would you like to say hello?
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having us on. It's great to get to chat and to talk to all of your viewers as well. It's a privilege to be here.
Well, it's an absolute privilege for us. And before we get into it, and I really want to tackle this thing about you bucking the trend and deciding not to cohabit and to marry without doing that first. Before we get into it, could you just give us a little bit about your background, where you both work, and what you're both doing in life at the moment?
Yeah, so I do a mix of things. I am a medical doctor part-time. I do a little bit of academic work as well. So my research is on bioethics and beginning of life ethics, particularly, since the beginning of life is often something that happens within marriage or traditionally happened within marriage. That obviously has a huge impact on the rest of society and how families are formed, how children are looked after and so on. So yeah, a big research interest in this sort of area. And then I do a lot of public speaking on the same topic as well.
Great. And Callum, what's your medical specialism?
So I work in general surgery, but I'm not at a very kind of senior level in it. Yeah. So I still might change in future. Yeah.
Great. Lois?
Yeah. So I work for a group called ADF UK, which stands for Alliance Defending Freedom UK. We're a legal charity. We work on any issues relating to faith in the public square. So maybe that's people who want to be able to practice their conscience in a medical situation, or preach on the street, or be able to express their faith. We live in a country and a climate and a cultural climate where that's very difficult at this moment of time. And quite often my work coincides with protecting the pro-life cause or standing up for family and Christian values in that sphere as well.
That's amazing. And that's very interesting because that topic is really at the forefront of things today when you think that we live in a country, unbelievably, where somebody can be arrested for standing on a street corner and thinking.
Right. Yeah, that was one of our big
that's just cases. Staggering.
That's right. That's one of our big cases this year. Isabel von Grace was a charitable worker who was only praying inside her head outside an abortion facility. So we're pleased to come alongside her and support her.
Yeah, and that's a whole other conversation maybe we can have another day. But listen, it's a real joy to have you both here. I know you've recently come back from honeymoon and you've recently got married, which is a great thing. But what I wanted to talk to you about really, you've bucked this trend. Most people, and I believe you're people of faith, and many of our viewers are Christians. A lot of them have got other faiths. A lot of them haven't got any faith at all. I know you guys have, but nevertheless you've bucked the trend, because even in churches these days you find that a lot of people cohabit before they get married. You haven't done that. You decided not to do that, and you decided just to get married without this concept, which is very popular today, of kind of try before you buy, if you like. And I'm just curious, what made you choose what some would see today as a very risky decision?
I think there's a kind of a few elements to it. So we know, from the research, it's very clear that cohabiting gives you a lower chance of success in marriage. It doesn't mean that you're guaranteed to have a failed marriage or anything by any means, but it gives you a lower chance of success. And as you will know better than anyone, there are probably a variety of reasons why that is. I think we wanted obviously to have a successful marriage, as I think most people set out to do, and so we wanted to follow that. But of course, there's a question of why does it give you a better chance of success to not live together before marriage? And there might be many different reasons, which are pretty complex in some cases. I think for me, what is really helpful is to have a really clear demarcation between marriage and anything that comes before it or anything other than marriage. I think when you sort of put marriage as sort of something at the end of a spectrum of commitment, so that there's a very gray line between marriage and not marriage, I think what that can do is sort of undermine the significance of marriage. Marriage is such a significant thing. It's a permanent promise for the rest of your life to be faithful, to raise children together, if you're lucky enough to have children together. It's really something that is unlike anything else in terms of its permanence, in terms of its commitment, and in terms of its legal, community, religious significance, and and everything that's tied up with it. So for me, it's really helpful that it remains a clear sort of line in the sand where you say, okay, from this point forward, this is where we agree. It's a covenant. We're going to make it absolutely permanent. We're going to live together for the rest of our lives. We're going to be faithful to each other. We're going to hopefully raise children together. And I think what happens when you sort of put that on a spectrum or blur the boundaries of it is it makes it very easy to sort of put conditions on that commitment. When you move in together and potentially have children together, as many people do, what you're sort of saying is, I really like you. I think it would be cool to have children together. I would like to stay with you forever. But if you're not married, then there's no real promise to do that. And so it always has that sense of instability. It always has that sort of conditionality. It always is something that is fragile or potentially could fall apart in that sense. Now, of course, we're not clueless. We know that marriages, sadly, in the modern world, don't always last. But, from our perspective, we believe that the reasons for that are really, really limited, if someone is unfaithful or something like that. But in other situations, we really believe that whatever your feelings, whatever your inclinations at a particular point, marriage is a permanent commitment for the rest of your life. And so I think we found that it was just a lot easier to apprehend that and put that into practice by making it something that was a really clear line in the sand. Whereas when you don't have that, when you sort of live together, you're sort of committing halfway, I guess, in a sense. And we wanted to make sure that it was a really full commitment, and that became clear with the marriage. So yeah, there's obviously cases where things don't work out within marriage. There's obviously cases where things do work out with cohabitation. We're not denying that. But we're talking about what gives the best chance and the best stable environment, both for each other and for our children as well.
And you're absolutely right that the stats are pretty clear that marriages are much more successful when they don't follow cohabitation. It doesn't mean exclusively, but in terms of the overall stats on a large scale. And even that commitment thing is quite profound. When you're cohabiting, it's as you say, it's kind of like saying, look, you'll do for now, but I'm reserving the right if someone better comes along or if you annoy me to say, well, actually, I've had enough of this, which marriage is supposed to be not that. Marriage is for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, sickness and health, all that sort of stuff that we know about. Apart from, you mentioned some caveats, abuse, adultery, abandonment, all that. But generally speaking, marriage is, we're going to do this for life. We're going to tell everyone that's what we're doing. And I can see how it's difficult if you've cohabited and then suddenly you get married and nothing really changes. And you can see how that kind of brings problems along, maybe. Lois, did you feel the same?
Yeah, I think just kind of reflecting on Callum's comments, we do live in quite a disposable culture in the 21st century. We're used to getting, a phone upgrade every 2 years. We're always expecting something better to come along. And millennials like myself, we don't tend to even stick with the same job in the same way that my dad stuck with the same job, the same company for most of his life. Most of us will hop from company to company, job to job, career to career. We're not used to things being permanent and committed. So I think that probably has fed into this culture of not wanting to marry, to commit, to stay in the long term. It's always going to be you, for better, for worse. So I think marriage offers like a real respite from that constancy of change in our culture and that constant feeling of, I might not be good enough tomorrow. Marriage offers something that's far more permanent and tangible, which is very countercultural, but it offers a real feeling of peace, I think.
So did you specifically look, some people will say that the idea of cohabiting is you can try things out, you can test, you can see what works, what doesn't work. If you haven't got that option because you're just going to say, right, this is it for life, did you put more effort into preparation, into looking up resources, or how did you prepare for marriage from that point of view?
It was a little more difficult for us than a regular couple because I, at the time, was living abroad in Austria. And Callum was living here in London, and most of our dating life was actually throughout the pandemic. So we didn't have a classic church hub that we both knew together, which I think is a traditional way that a lot of Christians prepare for marriage, and is probably very much the recommended way. We had to rely a little bit more just on books and literature. We read Tim Keller's, what was it?
The Meaning of Marriage.
The Meaning of Marriage. So we read that together last summer, and some other books like that, which obviously with Tim Keller's passing becomes more poignant, and he was a great writer and thinker, and inspired a lot of Christians. Yeah, I think there's a lot of great Christian resources out there. I think we probably didn't get to benefit as much from them, not being able to attend a course together. But it's something you can also do after you get married as well, which is something that we're looking into. Just because you have had your wedding doesn't mean that you stop preparing and stop trying to become a better husband or wife.
Well, I can tell you, 28 years on, that battle never ends. Callum, you're always trying to be, and it's funny because, shall I say? Yeah, I'll say this. You know, I think one of my jobs as a husband is to try and win my wife every day. You know, so I would like for me to be the man she would pick if she was picking today. Do you know what I mean? And that's an interesting thought. You know, if you're kind of living life and developing your marriage in that kind of sense, you know, hopefully that puts you onto a good track. In terms of the preparation that you mentioned and reading stuff and thinking about stuff, you've not been married for too long, but looking back, can you think of, it was good that we talked those things through beforehand?
Yeah, I think, you know, it's there's plenty of things that you have to decide before marriage. You know, plenty of things that we still need to think about and prepare for. You know, if we're lucky enough to have children, we have to think about that sort of thing. I think part of what was helpful that I think gets at people's sort of mentality of trying things out beforehand was that because we lived in different countries, sometimes, you know, we would go to stay with Lois's family in Scotland. Sometimes I was living with my father. Lois would come to stay at our house, but in a different room. Yeah. And that's, you know, that was a far cry from cohabitation, living together, you know, in most cases, staying in the same room, that sort of thing. But it nevertheless gave us opportunities to realize, okay, what might we struggle with? What might, you know, how might we navigate those difficulties? So I don't think it's completely crazy to say that you should have, you know, you should have an idea of what it's going to be like and, you know, navigate those sort of situations in advance. But it doesn't take cohabitation. It doesn't take living together. It doesn't take staying in the same room to figure out where are the challenges that we might, you know, have to face, what are the kinds of conflicts that might arise. And so I think we found that really helpful in a sort of way that was trying to a very limited extent what it might be like to live together for, you know, like a few days, but with that sort of accountability and not taking a step of, all right, let's live together, if that makes sense.
That makes perfect sense. Yeah. Anything to add, Lois?
Oh, I was just thinking about how we had to get used to Callum's dirty dishes and figure out how we were going to figure that out in marriage. So that's
very practical.
This is helpful.
Yeah. Very, very practical. I think one of the things I discovered later on in marriage which is the absolute classic, the old 5 love languages thing.
Yes.
Which I don't know if you've come across that. And do you remember what the 5 love languages? It's a book by.
That's right.
Yeah, it's a good book, and I've forgotten the author, but there's only one book which is called that, and it's very popular. And it's essential premise of the book is that we express and receive love in one or more of 5 different languages. And I think what were they? Touch, which is the classic male one, you know, physical, words of affirmation, compliments, which is another kind of male one, gifts. Time, spending time, and then acts of service, kind of doing things. And when I read that, it was quite profound for us because I'm probably a characteristic typical male statistically, but my wife's thing is acts of service, whereas I would look at acts of service and think, well, you know, theoretically you could get somebody in to do that stuff. It's relatively, but from her point of view, that's how she shows and expresses love. So if I want to show and express love, I do things. And she says, oh yes, you're speaking my language now, which without knowing that, you know, you're not going to pick that up. But that was quite useful, I found.
Yeah, I think what I noticed as well with that is I really think that the categorization is helpful and helpful to think through intentionally. What I also found, I think, is that you might express love and receive love in very different ways.
Yeah.
So, for example, it might be that I'm very good at doing acts of service, whereas if someone does acts of service for me, that's not something I particularly care about. Now, I'm making that example up. I actually probably am not great at acts of service, and I do like it when when people do things for me. But you get the point. I think
I do.
It's not just you speak one love language and you understand one love language. It's really more complex. But of course, you were saying that,
which actually comes down to communication, and this is one thing. So actually making the time to talk to each other, which sounds almost ridiculous to say, but in a busy house when you've 4 kids going through and something like the summertime when people are back from university and it's just completely nuts and they've got their friends and all sorts of people coming in and out of the place, finding time for Liz and I to actually sit down and communicate with each other is really tough, but absolutely essential. So you can talk about the things that you need to talk, because you can quickly find that the weeks go by and you're in the same room, but you don't really talk about things together because there's so much else going on. But that, we've realized that it's absolutely essential to try and make that time to communicate with each other. And really my message would be that happens from the start, and it has to happen from the start, and it really is a success factor.
I think for us as well, a lot of our marriage was focused on a joint mission that we have as well. We both are very passionate about the pro-life movement and protecting children in the womb and mothers who carry them. And a lot of our time together converges into our mission to do that together, which we love, and we're so happy to be a part of that. And I guess we're finding that balance as well of making sure we have communication about other things as well. and making time for each other outside of our mission, but still finding that balance of prioritizing both.
Do you have similar or dissimilar likes and interests apart from that?
Relatively similar. I think we have very different tastes. And there's a few things, I really love board games, which Lois is not a massive fan of. Lois loves going on walks, which I'm not a massive fan of. But otherwise, we both love dancing. We both love going to church. We both love all sorts of other things, similar music even in many cases. So yeah, I think fortunately the things we have in common go a lot beyond just kind of speaking of pro-life stuff. But yeah,
that's interesting, because we found that we don't have similar tastes in a lot of different things. We have some things in common, but the thing which is quite interesting is that we dislike the same things. we passionately dislike the same things, and I think that's fundamentally important, because if you're with somebody who passionately dislikes something that you're not too fussed about, you're okay with it really, that's difficult to get over.
That's true.
So great. I don't want to take up too much of your time. You're busy guys. You've got a lot of great work to do. What advice would you give to young people who are thinking, well, I might like to marry someday, but I'm a bit nervous. So let's try before we buy. What advice would you give to young people? Firstly, to get on and get married sooner rather than later, but also secondly, to take the same route as you've done and just save marriage in terms of cohabiting for something special and unique?
I think my advice would be to find couples that you look up to who have good marriages. I think that's something that really helped us. We went to, during our time of preparation for marriage, we went to stay with good friends of ours who were further on in their marriage journey, and that we really thought would inspire us, and they kind of gave us some advice and some tips, and we just kind of observed and we saw the genuine joy that they had in each other even further on in their marriage. And that just gave us so much peace as well about this, because I understand it is a big leap, even if you're Christian, and even if you've already kind of decided for a long time that you want to get married, it is a huge commitment, a huge leap. But if you see that kind of process further on by those who are going before you, it can make it really exciting and inspiring.
I think the same. Yeah, for me, it's not so much about, obeying rules and things. It's about looking up to something and having an ideal and an aspiration. Like, the thing that really inspired me most was thinking, what kind of man do I want to be? I want to be a man that is faithful to someone, that is a good father, a good husband. And like so many of the other role models I have, I just thought that's such a wonderful thing to aspire to. I want to be like that. And so in that case, it's not so much thinking through, theoretically what's right and what's wrong, and trying to do what's right and trying not to do what's wrong. It's about every day, how do I take another step towards being that kind of person? Because that's someone that I admire. And for me, that was a really helpful way of thinking about it. So I'd also say just don't waste your life. I think, I'm 31, so I'm not especially young. I would have, 50 years ago, I would have been seen as very old getting married. So I feel like, for many years, I wasted my life by not getting married. Fortunately, I did so, because if I got married earlier, then I wouldn't have married Lois. But nevertheless,
good answer, Callum. Good answer.
But I think it is true that the society tells everyone you have so many other things to do when you're young. Use that time, and you can save getting married for later. Whereas I actually think we can do all the same cool stuff married, and it's even better. So I really think this whole idea of you need to put that off and do other things. I think just do both. You can have your cake and eat it. Just do all the great stuff, but with your best friend and someone else on your team, I think is even better. It gives you much more stability. It gives you your best friend constantly in your life. It gives you a stable platform for having children. It gives you a whole lot of fun and encouragement and support when you're doing all these other things. And it really is just so much better so far. So don't waste your life. Just go ahead and do it. And be bold. I think most people think of themselves as brave and courageous, and yet they say, I'm too scared to commit to someone else. I'm too scared to get married. It's such a commitment. I actually think if you are a powerful, empowered, bold young person, like you say you are, then at least show that you are, and do something like getting married, because it really is an incredible thing. It takes a bit of courage, but if young people are yearning for something that's bold, if they're yearning for something that is exciting, if they're yearning for something that shows the virtue that they have, I think there's nothing really better to do than getting married for many people. So
what a marvelous testimony. And the evidence is on your side as well. The idea of having marriage as a cornerstone that you build your life on, instead of a capstone that you aim for later on. A lot of people have written about that. The idea is that if you get married young, well, you are healthier together, you're wealthier together. All the evidence seems to show that on a population basis. It's a real advantage to have that teammate by your side working out your life together. So that's absolutely marvelous. I think we need to make this into a longitudinal study and have you back regularly giving us hints and tips. But Callum knows what a privilege it is to talk to you. Any final thoughts?
Go for it, Callum.
I think just go for it. I mean, obviously, I don't want to encourage people being reckless, getting married just for the sake of it. You do have to think about it. If you're religious, pray about it. Speak to your friends, speak to your partner, and so on. I don't want to encourage just reckless marriages, because those can go horribly wrong. But I do think, it really is important that we don't just think, I'm just going to spend my whole life waiting. I'm going to spend my whole life, flicking between people, finding the right one. Marriage will always take sacrifices, and it will always be difficult. And we know, probably that's the most important thing we've learned so far, is that marriage is going to be difficult. Now, again, we're lucky. We haven't really seen that so much yet. We've had a great time so far, but everyone that we've spoken to says there will be times that will be really challenging. And so we're preparing for that. But at the same time, like I said, you want to be a bold young person that does something courageous and that really achieves something in your life. What more countercultural and kind of incredible achievement can you make in this day and age to have a successful marriage in an age that promotes constant change, in an age that promotes infidelity, in an age that promotes consumerism, in an age that promotes discarding culture, or trash can or rubbish culture, where you just get rid of people that are no use to you any longer. I think in an age like that, there's nothing better than to say to someone, I will be there for your whole life. You can be there for my whole life, and have that rock that you can really build the rest of your life on. I think it's better for you. It's better for them. and it actually is a remarkable achievement that we're yet to achieve, but we're hopeful that we will in the future.
4 weeks and counting.
Absolutely, and that's the beautiful difference between marriage and cohabitation, if you like. You know, so you know that, well, we're here for the long term. Nothing's going to stop this. So actually, we better work it out. You know, you will see each other's monster, and it won't be pretty. But you will work it out, and you will work it out together, and it will become great because of that. You know, it seems to be a thing about life that the things that are hardest to work out bring the greatest joy and the greatest fulfillment, and marriage is no exception to that. It absolutely is a fulfillment.
Absolutely.
Great both. Listen, it's such a privilege to talk to you. Please come back again at some point and tell us how it's all getting on. But just for now, Callum and Lois, what a huge privilege. Every blessing.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.